We're really glad to have you here, and tonight's program is going to be super exciting. I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce 3 of our esteemed professors that are involved with the new CDL, our Creative Destruction Lab, that's coming to Scheller the end of this year in September 2020. It's a program that's objectives-based for massively scalable science and tech-based companies. It was originally founded in Toronto, Canada, and has 8 different sites now. They recently partnered with us here at Scheller to open their next North American location, CDL Atlanta. So I think that's going to be really exciting. I talked to a lot of you guys that are really excited about the whole innovation, disruption. You really want to be more and more involved in that, and here's yet another way. So I want to introduce you. We have 3 people here tonight, 3 of our professors. Peter Thompson. Yes, you have to raise your hand, right? He is the Hal and John Smith Chair in Small Business and Entrepreneurship. He's a professor in strategy and innovation at Scheller and co-site lead for CDL Atlanta. Peter, during his tenure here at Scheller, has served as the Senior Associate Dean of Faculty and Research. And before coming to Scheller, he served on the faculty at Emory, Florida International, Carnegie Mellon, and the University of Houston. His research includes both theoretical and empirical work, and he's covered a variety of fields, including endogenous growth theory, industrial evolution, entrepreneurship, organizational learning, and medical decision-making. Peter's taught courses covering most areas of economics at the PhD, MBA, and undergraduate levels. So we're excited to have Peter. We also have Alex Oettl, who's associate professor and PhD coordinator in strategy and innovation here at Scheller. He's also co-site lead of CDL Atlanta and a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research. He obtained his PhD at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto in 2009, and his research focuses on the economics of innovation, entrepreneurship, and science. His current work focuses on the production and diffusion of breakthrough ideas at the individual, firm, and regional level. Professor Oettl has received funding from the National Science Foundation and was a recipient of the 2014 Kaufman Junior Faculty Fellowship in Entrepreneurship Research. His research has been profiled in numerous international media outlets, including Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Financial Times, Harvard Business Review, Nature Science, The Atlantic, Quartz, Wired, and Business Insider. So we're excited to have him. And our third person, Jonathan Giuliano, thank you, is also a professor in strategy and innovation at Scheller. The strategy and innovation group has something going, doesn't it? Executive director and academic director for our Tiger program here, and he is the academic director of CDL Atlanta. He teaches graduate, undergraduate, and executive students in technology innovation, corporate strategy, global strategy, strategy execution, and new ventures. He was voted Professor of the Year for elective courses for over 5 years by MBA students and has received a similar award for undergraduate electives. He's executive director and academic director of Tiger, which I think most of you are pretty familiar with our Tiger program, but it's technology innovation generating economic results, and is a technology innovation program bringing together graduate students from Georgia Tech colleges, from Emory School of Medicine, from Emory University's Law School and Morehouse School of Medicine. He started and co-founded 4 companies, all of which remain in operation. He's led turnarounds in the US and Europe, led high-growth companies as an interim executive and board director, licensed more than 100 technologies on 5 continents, and has raised more than $1.2 billion for startups and SMEs in the US, Europe, and Asia. He's advised C-level executives, board of directors at 21 of the Global 100. He also advises firms managing venture capital, private equity, and hedge funds. After receiving degrees at Colgate University and the University of Virginia, he earned a doctorate at the University of Manchester. So I was so impressed when I saw these bios, and I hope that I've done them justice, because I am very, very honored with the people that we have speaking, and I think they're going to give us a lot of good information today. So thank you. Thank you. Let's welcome.
So no pressure. So thank you for coming out on this dangerous night. I noticed nobody's shaken my hand today, so I may get home healthy. I've been really excited to be working for the last 4 months or so as we are trying to launch the Creative Destruction Lab. I had just settled down, retired from being the Senior Associate Dean, which is the world's worst job, herding kittens for 4 years. And thought, I'll just sit quietly, I'll do some research, and I'll be intellectual, and I'll write for my 10 friends who read my research papers. And Alex here came along and said, I've got this great thing that I'd like you to do with me. So I went to Toronto, where the program started, took a look, and I've been an academic for 30 years, so I'm generally not impressed with new programs. And I was blown away. and I was blown away, and now it has me waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Also delighted that I could get that we were able to induce Jonathan to join us as academic director of the program, because one of my greatest accomplishments as Senior Associate Dean was to induce Jonathan to become the director of Tiger, which he did not make easy. It took a long time, but now he has 2 jobs. So the way we're going to structure today, I'm going to give a short overview of the philosophy behind the Creative Destruction Lab, the problem we're trying to address, and how it's structured. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and there's no clear order of how do I tell the story of the Creative Destruction Lab. So fortunately, we will have a Q&A session after, and I've carefully designed my presentation that you'll have lots of questions. But between the Q&A and my presentation, Jonathan will talk a little bit about the relationship between Tiger and CDL. Now, this is not just a show and tell, because we do have some asks for you. There is some interesting engagement to be done with the CDL, and we'll talk about that at a later stage. But let me start out with the philosophy for CDL. So this is a slide we have stolen from the very original presentation that's been going on for many years of what CDL is about. So suppose you were to take a look at the United States from space, and imagine that you could see startup and entrepreneurial activity as in a topographical way. What would you see? You'd see a lot of hills around the cities, showing that there's more startup activity, there's more entrepreneurial activity in the cities than in the rural areas around them. Some hills would be bigger than others. Some would be almost unnoticeable from the areas around them, especially in the Midwest. But there'd be very few mountains. There'd be a mountain in New York, one on Route 128, one in LA, and then there is the massive mega mountain in Silicon Valley. So let's be a little less obscure and actually show you some data. So this is for 2015 to 2017, angel and seed investment throughout the United States. And so there you see enormous concentrations in just 4 places. A lot of other cities have some activity, but nothing comes close to Silicon Valley, San Jose, and generally Central California. Now, how does that compare with the science that's going on? Well, if we look at the science, here is an overlay of the map of patenting throughout the United States. And what we find is that it is a lot flatter. The topography of science is a lot flatter in the United States than the topography of seed funding. What comes out of this very clearly is that the dominance in seed funding of California is much greater than the dominance of patenting. Yes, it's still a big patenting area, but it's much less important. If we think about another way of the geography of what's going on, let's take a look at unicorns. So this is from middle of 2017, so it's not quite complete in a number of ways. But just look at how many billion-dollar privately owned companies are in California. Turns out that California alone has more unicorns than China. And the United States has as many unicorns as the rest of the world put together. I think this number is 98, I think it's 106 in the world as a whole. But there's this massive concentration in California. Now take a look at look at Georgia. List 2. Now that's not quite complete because we also have Rubicon Global Waste Management, originally a Kentucky firm, relocated to Atlanta and is now a unicorn. There's a new one, OneTrust, has just raised $200 million in funding with a valuation of $1.5 billion. Is that right, Alex? $2.7 billion. There's also missing from here some unicorns from the past. Think of Tom Noonan and Chris Claus's internet security systems that IBM acquired just over a decade ago, and Green Sky that very recently IPO'd. So depending, by the way, where is MailChimp here? MailChimp is completely missing. Anybody know why MailChimp is not on CB Insight's list?
It's not venture backed.
Yeah, they never diluted it whatsoever. There's 2 guys own the entire company. So it's a guess, but if you look up Forbes, who are the wealthiest people in the world, it's probably worth a few billion. So MailChimp should also be a member of this club. But it doesn't matter how you really measure it. There's a clear takeaway. Compared with what's going on in California, most places in the United States have way too few unicorns, especially when you think about how much really good technology and science is coming out of Atlanta and the Southeast. Another thing to remember is that all those unicorns in California, the majority of them were not born in California in the sense that the founders moved there in order to grow their company and came from elsewhere. So there's something about Silicon Valley and California in general that is attracting companies, that is making it easier for these companies to grow, to secure investment. So what could this be? Why is it harder to build startups outside of Silicon Valley? Well, one is maybe there aren't enough ideas elsewhere. But I think you only have to walk around the campus of Georgia Tech, possibly with a buzz card to get access, to see just how many good ideas are emerging from here. Over at Emory Medical School, the CDC, great science is going on. Over at the University of Georgia, they have an okay football team. But so it's certainly not the lack of ideas. It's not the lack of capital. There's an awful lot of capital in Atlanta, working capital, but it has to be said that a lot of the angel and VC capital is shying away from early stage science, something that we want to talk about. And it's certainly not the case that people in California work harder. I've never seen any evidence of that. The only time I lived in California, I did no work whatsoever. So the thesis of the Creative Destruction Lab is that the reason it's harder to build startups outside of Silicon Valley is that there is a failure in the market for high-quality judgment. It's a great phrase. It's a great buzz phrase. You may hear that a lot today. Let me tell you what I mean in a very straightforward way. Suppose you are building a science or deep tech-based venture. There's 1,000 things you need to do to get that company going. But you've only got so much runway. You've only got so much funding. You've only got so much time. Which of those 1,000 things do you do in order to make sure you get yourself ready for seed funding, for Series A, and to keep progressing before you have to put it back on the shelf and give up? The thesis of CDL is that this judgment is best embodied in people who have done it before, who have founded, they have built and grown and successfully exited their own science-based or technology-based startup. They've gone through it all. And let me contrast that with, say, VC firms. VC firms often know what they need to see in order to be willing to invest, but have much less experience in telling people who are a long way from there how to get there and what they need to do and in what order. In science-based companies, there's a shortage of this judgment outside of Silicon Valley because there's a shortage of people who have built and successfully exited these sorts of firms and remained in Atlanta. So the Creative Destruction Lab, I have to get this right, is a program for seed stage, massively scalable science-based companies. That is, companies with the potential either to have nothing in the science and no commercial value or to become unicorns. It is an objective setting program which helps the technical founders focus on the most important things, at hand, and not spend their time, as many technical founders do, falling in love with their own science, getting deeper and deeper into the science, and not thinking about verticals, not thinking about the business side of their activities. Since 2012, over 1,000 ventures have gone through this Creative Destruction Lab program, and it's created $4.5 billion in value. Now, that's quite a mark of success, but the CDL is much more ambitious than that. Its current goal is to create equity value of $100 billion by 2027. At 2012, there was a single site at the University of Toronto where the program was launched. After a few years, it expanded with the help of the Canadian government, and has expanded to British Columbia, to Calgary. Calgary specializes in, unsurprisingly, in oil and gas. It's expanded to Halifax on the East Coast, specializing in clean ocean technology, and in Montreal, specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Last year, the program expanded internationally to Oxford University, where they are specializing in artificial intelligence. And this year, we are launching in Atlanta and Paris. So with this scaling, an awful lot of the companies here, so $4.5 billion in equity value since 2012, but most of the companies in CDL who have graduated from CDL are still only 2 or 3 years old. So the goal of $100 billion is more than a pipe dream. That puts it on about the pace of Y Combinator's history, Y Combinator's value creation in its history. So the program has quite a unique structure because you're all thinking, okay, another accelerator program, is it time for the reception? But I want to talk about how it's different and why we think it is addressing this problem of a shortage of judgment, why it might help companies grow and stay in Atlanta and help build a vibrant technical investment community right here. It's a program that's delivered over 9 months, and it involves 5 one-day sessions. A cohort of 25 firms. Toronto at the moment has 7 cohorts going on at the same time. Other sites have 1 or 2, possibly 3. We will start with 1 cohort here and grow to 3 or 4 cohorts over the first few years. So a cohort of 25 firms, and in each session they meet for 1 day. And this objective setting is the core of the process. So a typical day is split into 2 parts. In the morning, ventures meet with the mentors in the program one-on-one. And the goal here is the mentors and the venture founders discuss the progress the company has made, the problems they're having, and the mentors are tasked with working towards identifying what are the 3 things that they need to do before the next session. So the venture founders may meet with 6 or 7 mentors during the morning. And then in the afternoon, and this is the hallmark of the Creative Destruction Lab, all the mentors come in to a single large room. Here you see in the picture the 2 venture founders standing up front. Looks a bit like pitch day, except in this instance, the ventures don't get to speak because scientists are terrible about doing pitches and explaining the value proposition of their businesses. Let me tell you how I've solved the quantum annealing problem. Well, thank you. Could you tell me about a business problem you're addressing? So instead of that, one of the mentors, an experienced entrepreneur who has met with them in the morning and is assigned to be lead entrepreneur, introduces the firm, explains to the room why they like this company, what they do and don't like about it, and then lays out these are the 3 tasks, the 3 objectives I believe this firm needs to accomplish over the next 2 months before the next session. Now, this venture has, the founders have met with half a dozen mentors in the morning, and they have listened to different opinions about objectives. At this point in time, they've heard 18, 20, 25 objectives. Well, we're back to you've got so many things to do, we're not really helping you. Imagine if you were lucky enough to be able to meet six advisors down in Starbucks. You meet one for an hour, then you get another meeting, you meet another for an hour. By the time you are done with that, you have 20 suggestions of these are the things you must do. There's almost no overlap, and you're no better off. You still don't know what it is you really need to do. So what we do in this room is we crowdsource. Those first objectives set by the lead mentor are then critiqued by another mentor. Alex and I and other faculty will be in the room, and we are not allowed to give opinions, which will be very hard for us. We are only there to moderate, and in fact, we have a dear friend in Toronto who was moderating and couldn't stop giving opinions, and he was fired. We exist there just to ensure that as we are seeing through this company, there are 25 companies to get through in an afternoon in a 15-minute period. We hear objectives, we hear a critique, we guide a discussion in the room so all the mentors can focus on, well, why do we have a difference of opinion? Maybe it's we're unsure about the science. There is a scientist in the room who is an expert in this field and has reviewed the science who can help explain that in commercial terms. And in this 10-minute period, the room settles on 3 objectives that are left for the founders to follow. Now, we then don't go away and wait for 2 months and leave these companies, let's see how they do when they come back. This is where the educational component comes in. We will assign MBA students on coursework as practicums to work with these companies in achieving their objectives. So very much like live case studies. We will have a team of venture managers who ensure that 2 things are happening. that there is documentation of the progress the companies are making towards these objectives, and that the mentors are following through on any commitments they've made to continue to advise the companies virtually over the 2-month period. Okay, who are these mentors and fellows and associates? Well, there's an awful lot of successful entrepreneurs, prominent business people in this, but let me just take two pretty much at random. Anousheh Ansari. She is the founder of a couple of companies. The most recent, Prodea Systems, it's Internet of Things, prominent Internet of Things technology. But many of you may know of her as the first woman to go to the International Space Station as a private passenger, and as the co-founder of the Ansari Prize for reusable space rockets that kicked off private space. She lives in Plano, Texas. At the bottom right, Siobhan Zilis is project director in the CEO's office at Tesla. She is an advisor to OpenAI. Before she was with Tesla, she was a founding partner at Bloomberg Beta, which is an early stage investor in high-tech companies. And she lives in Silicon Valley. Now, the reason I mention where they live is to highlight that these mentors come from all over the world to go to these sessions. Siobhan, for example, not only goes to the Toronto sessions in artificial intelligence, this year she's been going to Oxford as a mentor. So at her own expense, she flies from Silicon Valley 4 times a year to go to Oxford to give advice. And it's in this way that you can strengthen your local community. If, as we've argued, you've got a limited number of mentors available locally with the right background, you can strengthen that by bringing in experienced mentors from elsewhere. They're not the only people in the room. Sounds like that photo looked like a crowded room just to have a pile of mentors sitting in there. There are also corporate and technology partners, and this is where it may be relevant to many of you. For corporations, corporations are in the room for a number of reasons. One is they are potential customers. Second, they can clarify what the business needs are. Most of these companies here are B2B, not B2C. And so very often these companies will be in the room saying, you know, that's not a pain point for us. Or we have been working on that technology for quite a few years and we haven't got as close as you've got. Let's talk about a partnership. Let's talk about a letter of intent. So corporate and technology partners serve a very valuable purpose in there. There are also venture capitalists, venture capital firms, some local and many non-local. I don't know why that's not on the diagram. The VC firms that are there primarily to invest for deal flow. And it turns out the majority of companies that go through the CDL program will close seed stage during this program. And it will often work with the VC firms and the mentors who are often active angel investors. Will see enough progress that the venture decides we are ready for seed stage funding, and the moderator will simply ask, so I see in my notes this company is ready for seed stage funding. Show of hands, anybody who's interested in talking to them. And then they will be connected. What is important and that's unique about the Creative Destruction Lab is that the Creative Destruction Lab, unlike almost any typical accelerator program, takes no equity and charges no fees to these companies. It's a purely philanthropic exercise. And as it's non-residential, that means in CDL are companies who are currently in Y Combinator, who are currently in Venture Lab, who plan to go to engage afterwards. So it is completely rivalrous in that nature. So the venture capital firms, one of the attractions, I mentioned that in Atlanta, venture capital firms tend to shy away from early stage science in Atlanta. A lack of experience, an inability to de-risk. Now, you can have all sorts of shows where it's pitch day, let me see a company, and I really don't know. I'm really not comfortable with things that are new to me. What you get to see here is like watching a video of a company rather than a photograph. You get to see them over a 9-month period. You get to see if the founders respond to advice, if they follow through, if they are solving problems, if they're identifying companies. You get to see how experienced angel investors, experienced mentors evaluate these companies and decide whether they are ready to support the companies. And slowly over time, as a VC firm, you get more comfortable with investing in an early stage science. Another thing that doesn't happen a lot in early stage companies in Atlanta is getting a local company when it's high tech to be the lead. And that's the key thing about getting the company to stay in Atlanta as it grows. Venture Lab, where it has success, the majority of the companies that come out of Venture Lab that end up doing well leave. And that's okay for Venture Lab, because Venture Lab does not have a mission for Atlanta development. That's not part of its mission. But that's something that we would like to change, and we think we can with CDL. So I mentioned scientists and economists are in the room. The scientists are very useful. The economists, because this is a program is designed by and run by economists, we feel like economists should be in the room, but we're probably not. You know, it's not a real science, as they say. So the scientists are there to help. Not only do they mentor the companies on the science, they also mentor and advise the mentors on the science. So the mentors can say, okay, I understand you've developed a quantum computer memory. My first trip to Toronto, I sat down, 2 young guys from London, and so I'm sitting with the mentor, and it was, well, what is your company about? And it's, oh, well, we've built a quantum computing memory. You did? I said, well, is that a good thing? I didn't really know much about it. Well, he said, then went on a whole bunch of technical issues that I was just waiting for him to finish, because I had no idea, well, where you're going to sell this and what is your customer base. The scientists who are accustomed to dealing with the science, and they're doing research at the frontier of the science, can evaluate the science and translate it so that the mentors can focus on, I don't think you have the right vertical. I can give you an example. There was one in Toronto that had a method for evaluating fluids, and their planned vertical was the perfume industry. Well, the mentors realized very quickly you should be in oil and gas and you should go to Calgary. So now they are an oil and gas company. The technology didn't really matter. It was the application, and the scientists can help keep that focus. What's in it for the founders? Well, for the founders, free advice. CDL charges no fees, it's non-residential, it's non-rivalrous. Because it takes no equity, it doesn't screw up the cap table. One of the worst things you can do to a company as a university is take ownership of part of the company, because it frightens away an awful lot of other investors, especially if you are a public university subject to all sorts of state regulations and rules. And conflict of interest statements that just prevent the company and prevent other investors from getting on with their job. So there's none of that going on. Access to crowdsourced expert judgment in objective setting. Access to corporate partners, technology partners, VC firms working in the same field, and support in between these sessions to accomplish the objectives that are set. What's in it for the fellows and associates? Well, this is really a founder-first program. The fellows are there to pay it forward, so for the greater good. Chen Feng I like to put up there because he almost has a full-time job being a mentor now to CDL, that he loves it so much. He goes to Montreal, he goes to the Rockies, he goes to Toronto, he goes to Vancouver. I wouldn't be surprised if this year he's popped up in Oxford. But everybody is a volunteer. They're contributing their time and judgment, and this is huge. So down here, Chris Hadfield, he is a mentor in the space program at Toronto, and I'll talk about the various streams and what we are thinking about here a little bit later. He says, why do we do it? For me, fundamentally, it's to improve quality of life. And the idea here is there's some great science out there, but too much of it stays on the shelf. And it's just going to be a good thing to get this to market, to get this science developed. So that's why they're there. The other is the intellectual excitement. This is like ongoing executive education for the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. It's stimulating. If I were in a room with one of these mentors and I disagreed with their advice, they're not going to listen to me. They've always got that one up. Well, what do you know? You've only read about it. So they get pushback from people that they respect, from people that they've gone through the same thing. They get to see a diversity of opinions. It's also the CDL promise that we only ask you for 4 days to come for 4 days in the year. There is a 5th day in Toronto called Super Session where all the graduating companies and all the mentors from the network show up. It's just an enormous event with 1,000 people going on for 2 days. But it's a 4-day commitment. And if you want to pay it forward and mentor firms and help young companies get started, this is the most efficient way that you can do it. Finally, it's curated deal flow. John Francis has been a mentor in Toronto since the program started in 2012. And he wrote last year that 35 of the 40 ventures that he's invested in since 2012 have been CDL firms. He no longer has to look anywhere else. Why is this? And why does this matter? CDL is a network. So the way to think about it, this is not CDL from Toronto is opening up a branch here. It is we are joining the league. Georgia Tech has a football team but belongs to a conference. So we are opening CDL and taking advantage of the international network. One of the most important things that this network gives you is a centralized application. In 2019, CDL had 21 applicants from 70 countries. It admitted 375 ventures. This year, they are expecting over 3,000 applications and anticipate only a 10% acceptance rate. The science and potential for scalability behind these companies is evaluated by scientists in the Canadian National Research Council. So there is this enormous filtering. By the time a cohort of 25 firms arrives, at any given site, they have been carefully selected to be promising. Add to that a specialization, whether it's logistics, whether it's artificial intelligence. And then imagine you were working for Kleiner Perkins and you're saying, I'm interested in looking at some logistics firms in Atlanta, some startups in logistics. Well, I think there's 3 of them. It's not even really worth me flying there to talk to 3, given that those 3 are probably all crap. But if you tell me that there are 3 companies from Atlanta, but they are mixed in with 25 companies selected from all over the world because they are the most promising, then yeah, I'm in. And that's how you get investors, VC firms, angel investors, and mentors to make the trip, is this network selection process. I will skip that. What about corporate partners? There's really a few things that make this a value proposition for corporate partners. The first is, I guess it's a bit of a buzzword these days, but future-proofing. Seeing in your areas of concern what new technologies are coming along, what new approaches, solutions are coming along. They may be solutions where you will be a customer, or solutions where you could be a competitor, or solutions where you could be a partner. The second is many corporations these days are interested in, I guess to put it casually, in playing startup, but don't have the culture or the structure to do that. This provides a sort of guided structure to see a lot of firms, to think about investing in them, to provide the scientific support that would otherwise be lacking. There may be investment opportunities, and there are also recruiting opportunities. You're getting to watch MBA students work with these companies, produce reports, and so forth. So I just want to finish off. I'm going to stop in just a couple of minutes. My slides go on and on and on, but I'm not going to. I always used to like putting at the bottom, slide 3 out of 120, just to frighten people, and then have that 120 go up as you went through the presentation. Makes people very nervous, or makes them leave. So here is a list. You can visit the Creative Destruction Lab site and say, well, what companies have gone through? What sort of things that they do? There is a quantum computing stream. There is a space stream that the first year they thought it was disappointing because they had too many rockets. And it turns out that new companies trying to do reusable rockets are so far behind the leaders that they started drifting into satellites and software. There's a lot of artificial intelligence, logistics. So it's these sorts of technologies. There are health streams. In Canada, the Canadian Cancer Institute, the Canadian Cancer Society has signed a deal to create a stream of companies purely working on treatments for cancer, and that will launch next year. So this is just a list of companies from artificial intelligence, and let me just show you one down here, deep genomics. So deep genomics uses AI to predict the structure of molecules such as viruses, potential treatments, without actually examining them. It's so far raised $56 million through Series A. Let's take a look at the funding there. So actually, sorry, Series B was the $40 million it's just raised. You see in item number 3 there, the non-equity assistance. That non-equity assistance is the Creative Destruction Lab. I'm not quite sure how that gets registered in there, but I want to point out the seed round. This company was in the program 2015 to 2016, started in October 2015, and in November opened a seed round in CDL. Now, its investors in that seed round included Bloomberg Beta with Siobhan Zilis. And Siobhan Zilis was the mentor, the lead mentor assigned to this program. So it's helping them progress and also being the lead investor. And there were 2 CDL mentors in the Series B funding. So there is this whole network of activities that go on. And one more thing that is nice about this company. So Matt Cahill was an MBA student assigned in his class to work on deep genomics tasks. Well, at the end of that, when he graduated, they hired him as director of operations. In fact, before he even graduated. So he's now director of operations. And there's several other companies where the CEO of those companies, they've got to Series A, Series B, and the CEO is an MBA student. So it can get very interesting on the educational side. These live cases, you don't know where these companies are going to go, but some of them are going to go quite far. So just talking about the different streams. So most sites, when they launch, start out with what they call a prime stream, which is we're going to choose companies from a variety of areas, but areas that we think we've got strength in, that we think we might like to we might like to specialize in the future. And then after the first year, sites develop specializations. What determines the specializations is your own ecosystem and your own strengths. Because here's part of the motivation when it comes to Atlanta development. We want to choose specialized streams where we can get the scientists, we have the infrastructure to support those companies, not just in CDL, but outside of CDL. That there is the technology around, there is the ability to hire the experts that you'll need as you grow, and to hire staff as you'll grow. We also want to choose specializations where companies from elsewhere coming through the CDL program and seeing what Atlanta has to offer, and we'll work with the Metro Chamber of Commerce, with GRA, in various other organizations, get to see what Atlanta has to offer and say, well, if I get my seed funding here, I'm going to move there, because that's, especially if I get my lead there. So we want to choose specializations where we have strengths. Well, that's an almost never-ending list for Atlanta. We don't even have to leave Georgia Tech, and you think robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing, logistics, other forms of supply chain issues, and on you go, cybersecurity. So we are looking at two general streams. One in consumer health. We've had some excellent conversations with the School of Biomedical Engineering, with Biolocity. These are, the School of Biomedical Engineering, interestingly, is a joint school across Emory and Georgia Tech, quite unique. And so consumer health will be artificial intelligence approaches to health problems, biomedical engineering, and so forth. And then retail tech. And retail tech, we're going to take a very broad approach, and we're going to be much more interested into the B2B side than the B2C, thinking about logistics, supply chain, payments. 70% of all payments go through Atlanta. And in fact, next week, I'm giving a talk to Peach Pay, which is the Atlanta Fed's collection of payments firms, and telling them about the program and where we're going. So these are the specializations that we plan to focus on, and our goal is to have a single cohort starting this fall, 2 cohorts entering the following year, and 3 cohorts the year after that. And that might be a steady state for 2 of us as co-site leads. That one might kill us. So that's our goal. And I'm going to stop there, and I'd like to pass it over to Jonathan to talk about the educational component, and particularly how you all might get engaged.
Thank you, Peter. So anytime, this is truly the best thing about CDL. I get to work with Alex and Peter. I was at CDL 2 weeks ago, and I'll tell you a little about that. But how many of you here were in the Tiger program? Right? Okay, great. So about 5% of you. I assume the other 95% wishes you had been in the Tiger program, and this will be your opportunity. But first, let me tell you about my experience in Toronto 2 weeks ago. More than 500 people there in February for that session. It was the 3rd session in this cohort. As I sat in the classroom that Peter showed you, it was really interesting to me to evaluate what was going on. My expectations were high. Peter had already told me this was the best program at a university he had seen in his 30 years. I've been around universities in the US, Europe, and Asia for about 40 years, and I can tell you, even though my expectations were high, still the best program I've seen at a university. And as I sat in that room, I could identify with virtually every role in the room because, I have been or still am, in the roles of entrepreneur, early stage investor, corporate investor, mentor, and even, I suppose, if we define the term loosely, academic. I've even been that MBA sitting in the back of the room. And you may have inferred from what Peter said is that this is an educational program. And the MBAs were fascinated and fascinating to me in what they were learning and the structure around how the MBAs are prepared to engage with companies because, as you may know from Tiger, we have students work on at least concepts for enterprises and engage in both entrepreneurial activities and corporate innovation. And here are these MBA students engaging in what could only be called living case studies, those videos over 9 months that Peter described. And then they're not only adequately prepared with a full course before they start working with these companies over 9 months, but they're debriefed after every session. Their faculty there debriefing them, helping them understand what they saw, listening to the ideas they have. Just a fantastic program. A few quick updates on the Tiger program. So you may know, you certainly know now, I've been the director of the Tiger program for the past 18 months. Yes, thank you, Peter. And in that past time, I taught one cohort that was selected before I arrived, and I've selected the current cohort, which is in its first class. We moved the start of Tiger from the fall to the spring. We have approximately 80 students in one Tiger cohort. We have doubled or tripled all of the metrics on Tiger. About 20 of those are JD students from Emory Law. We have about 60 PhD MBA students. 21 women, you may recall entire Tiger cohorts of PhD and MBA students that were smaller than 20 students, 21 women, 22 students in the program who either hold their PhDs or are working toward their PhDs, and we have tripled or quadrupled every statistic on underrepresented minorities in the program. So we're really excited about how the program is going. This is the term. We are preparing our MBA and PhD students to work with CDL companies starting in the fall of 2020 and then continuing in the spring of 2021. Despite our growth, here's the ask. We want your help as alumni. So what happens in the CDL program is that these startups come in. As Peter told you, they are typically technical founders who often know essentially nothing about business. And that's where our MBAs come in. But as you could do the arithmetic, even given the growth in Tiger, it is likely that we are going to be looking for MBAs, and that includes MBA alumni who would like to work with these startups to engage with them. And what we're going to do toward that end is send our MBA alumni simply a questionnaire to see if you are interested in working with some of these startups. If so, what would you be interested in doing? How much time do you have? What are your objectives? Your objectives could range from wanting to join a startup and work with a group of founders to expand the enterprise, or perhaps you're in corporate innovation and you'd want to engage with startups to see if there is something there that you could learn and apply to your company, or that your company may want to invest in or inquire. So we'll send a questionnaire to our MBA alumni to see how you would like to engage. Those of you more than a few of you have suffered through more than a few of my classes. So again, my apologies. You may recall, I know I've had conversations with many of you shortly before you graduated about the two most important things in developing your career are really knowledge and networks. And this is a program about knowledge and networks. It truly is an educational program. There's a reason that it is founded in, it is grounded in universities. And I think it gives the program unique value. So this is a program that will help you increase knowledge in these living case studies, see what these companies are doing at the cutting edge, and increase your network across all of the people who are in that room. More than 500 people, as I said, at Canada, in Toronto 2 weeks ago. It was fascinating. Especially the level of people in the room. There was a head of research at the Canadian National Defence Force talking with AI companies. There was a head of research at the Canadian Health Service talking with health therapeutics and health diagnostics companies. Senior executives from corporate venture capitalists, from global corporations, heads of research of global corporations, names of companies everyone in this room would recognize. And it was really exciting to be in that network. One final story, Peter talked about one of the former MBAs who became director of operations at one of the CDL companies. I met a fellow named Laurent who 4 years ago was an MBA student at Rotman, and he worked on a company as a biotech company started by 4 scientists out of the University of Toronto. He is now CEO of the company. I think he was employee 6. And now he is CEO of the company. The company closed last month. It's Series C. No, I'm sorry, I think it was the Series B. Series B, $22 million. Current market cap over $200 million. And here he is. I suspect someday in a few years he'll approach his 30th birthday. And he's an angel investor in this room. We had a great conversation, and I'm hoping that in the years ahead we can see not only our MBA students actively engaging with these companies, but our MBA alumni leading some of these CDL Atlanta startups. So if you have any questions about how you can engage, Tiger is the educational track. MBA students who get into the roles with startups and CDL have to take a course ahead of time. That's our first Tiger course. I've modified the curriculum to include all of the terrific material and resources that CDL provides. So Tiger is the track. That's the role that Tiger plays in preparing and mentoring and coaching our students so that they can get the most out of their experience with these startups. And we would welcome any participation from alumni. So you will, I hope, see a questionnaire soon from us about CDL Atlanta and any role that you would like to play in it. But you know how to find me, j.g@gatech.edu. Send me an email anytime, and I'd be happy to do whatever we can for you. Questions? Is this the time when we have questions and answers?
I think so.
Okay.
I've got mics here, so.
Hello, Aaron Enton, PhD, MBA, currently running a startup here in Atlanta. For anyone who is interested in potentially joining the Atlanta CDL group in 2020, when do applications open and what does that process look like?
Sure, I'll grab that. So they'll open at the beginning of April. They will close in August. The exact dates sort of yet to be determined. It'll be, it's more than just a few paragraphs. It'll be, part of what we're looking for is deep tech, deep science that may or may not have found some sort of product market fit. So, if you think about sort of the distribution of companies that are coming in, some will be sort of very, very early stage, no product market fit yet. On the other tail, right, if you think of this as a normal distribution, on the other side, some might actually already have some profitability. The modal firm will be right at sort of the letter of intent type of stage as one's moving into beta testing. But we should follow up afterwards. I'll introduce you to our director of operations, who will be leading our recruitment efforts. So.
Similar question. I don't know if this is on. Graham Gans, Class of 18 alum, also founder. What percentage of the companies do you expect to be Atlanta companies? Is there a kind of favoritism to being a Georgia Tech alum and being Atlanta-based, or is it CDL picks companies and sends them to y'all?
So we. Yeah. Oh, sure. So the question was, what percentage of companies do we imagine of this cohort of 25 ventures will be local? Do we have, sort of favorites? Do we have preferences? I think what makes this program sort of fairly distinct is that it's not just trying to push out Atlanta companies. And what I mean by that is, there are a host of initiatives throughout Campus Venture Lab that is sort of focused on Georgia Tech commercialization, ATDC, which is focused more on Georgia, sort of commercialization. This is not, to artificially sort of prop up those ventures. What we are trying to do is, imagine, and I'm not sure what sort of space you're in, sort of deep tech, or actually, what space are you in?
So venture capital space.
Okay, gotcha.
Using AI.
Using AI, right? So imagine you have some, sort of biotech-oriented sort of AI companies, again, like BenchSci that was mentioned before, or sort of deep genomics. And Georgia Tech has sort of 4 excellent companies in the space, like really, really top tier. That's probably not enough to get Kleiner Perkins on a plane to come out to Atlanta. You embed those 4 ventures, however, in a larger cohort, right, of 25 just excellent ventures from across North America, from across the world. One thing that I don't know if sort of came up, there's over 25 countries that are represented in this program. Because of this non-residency aspect, it's just a flight. What happens when you have 25 absolutely top-tier ventures, of which Georgia Tech is very well represented in areas that Georgia Tech is already has a strength in? It creates that attraction for VCs, from marquee VCs, to come to Atlanta and participate in the program. So that's sort of at a very high level. In the first year, though, we expect approximately 60% to be a little bit more local, and then sort of over time, maybe 45%. We're hoping the modal institution, though, will be Georgia Tech, because again, to be clear, this isn't just to prop up Georgia Tech. It's because we're choosing verticals that Georgia Tech is producing ventures that are world class, but that there have been some difficulties, where difficulties might exist in getting them sort of over that valley of death, from concept to an initial Series A. That's where this program really excels.
So we're actually responsible for recruiting beyond Atlanta. So our recruiting region is essentially the Southeast, down to Miami, up to the Mason-Dixon line, I guess, and across to the Alamo. I think I got them all there.
There we go.
And so the majority of companies will come from there. Often what happens, because it's a network, there may be a company here that we say, yeah, you've applied to the program. The applications are national, even though the recruiting is divided up. But often we'll say, you really need to fly up to Calgary, or you really need to fly up to, you're working on ocean technology. You need to go to Halifax. And so there's firms that apply, list their preferences of which of the sites they want to go to, and many want to stay local because, well, if I can find mentors here, if I can get a lead investor here, I don't have to upset my family by relocating, to follow my lead investor. So yeah, I want to go to the local one. But some will have technology reasons why, no, I really need to go to I really need to go to another site. As you can imagine, Calgary has a lot of firms from Houston going up there. And So yeah, there's very much a bias because it's not just about the firms. One of the attractions for us is playing a small role in perhaps unifying and strengthening the investor community. As you know, some of you will be aware that this is a very disparate group of largely non-overlapping investor groups. And we are actively trying to recruit mentors, the local mentors we're recruiting, we are actively trying to draw them from these diverse groups and put them in the same room. So, so we do want to, you know, so we have the bigger goals, bringing firms. The space program, well, actually, I think a good example is quantum computing was launched in Toronto 3 years ago, I think. Now, quantum computing is a little strange. You know, many of these companies have software for which the computer has not been built. So they're very early stage. Some of these companies come into CDL and they're only a few weeks old. In fact, they were formed specifically to go to CDL. And so they have some special treatment for quantum computing. But at the end of last year, The Economist magazine ranked Toronto as the #1 city in the world for quantum startups. And, you know, so that is the impact you can have of creating a reason. Now, it was coupled with strategic hires and investments by the university in that field. But with the quantum strength you've got here, for example, attracting companies from outside to come here is also a win. So there are also non-venture reasons that's good for Atlanta, the investment community, that we hope are touch points for the program.
I'd emphasize something Peter said earlier, that this is complementary. And in conversations I've had, Peter's had, Alex has had, with people across the Georgia Tech campus, from the highest levels of the administration to the College of Engineering, College of Computing, people in economic development, people at ATDC Venture Lab. Everyone sees that this is really additive, it's complementary. Not only is it going to offer more paths to success for startups in Atlanta and in the Southeast, but it is also going to showcase, I think, Scheller, showcase Georgia Tech, showcase Atlanta, and even the state of Georgia. So you know, we're eager to make this a big success fast, and frankly, I would like to see us crowd out any other CDL in the Southeast. I think we can do everything that the Southeast needs right here with your help. Other questions?
So I just want to understand more about how operationally it will happen. I just want to get a better sense of the operations here. As an MBA student, say I'm an MBA student, I probably make an application with you, professor, and you'll select me or not, and I'm witnessing all the, over the 5 days that you identified. But the other companies, you have a lot going on. You have the VCs, you have the interaction with the companies that you might have, and everything that's operationally. So who is taking care of all that at your end here? Is there a staff that's going to be doing this? The quality should not suffer, right? I mean, one should not leave at the end of the day, I didn't get anything out of this.
I was hoping he was. It is a mixture. A lot of faculty are going to be engaged in this program. A lot of faculty have come to us and said, okay, well, this is my area of expertise. How can I get involved? The curriculum and the quality control is under the direction of Jonathan as academic director of the programs, and there'll be several other faculty involved. There are staff members who are venture managers, generally people with degrees in STEM and then business experience, but who will be overseeing a number of things. They oversee record keeping and making sure that the ventures are making progress. They ensure that mentors who have committed to provide. One of the things we ask for mentors is you have to, in order to invite a company back, at least one of the mentors has to say they're worth my time, not necessarily because they're a good enough company. It may just be I've got things I can help them with. Some companies may be perfectly good, but you look at them and say, well, none of us really have anything to add at the moment. Perhaps you need to go back to the bench for a year and go back to the lab for a year and come back in a year. And in order to invite a company back, at least one mentor says, I think they're worth my time, which is the most valuable or scarce resource that these mentors have. And they commit to giving 4 hours of mentoring. The venture managers are on top of them to make sure that happens. There's a very strong culture here that you follow through on your commitments. And the venture managers will work under the direction of Jonathan to assign MBA students enrolled in the courses to companies for tasks. Now, how that works is different from Tiger. So typically in Tiger, you're working on the same project from the start. You risk falling in love with the technology. You risk paying all the attention to the technology, even though it gets obvious at a fairly early stage. You know, this technology is not going anywhere, but we've got a lot of jobs to do. Now we've got to do customer discovery. I know the technology doesn't work. I know, there's not going to be any customers, but let's go pound the street. And that happens sometimes with Tiger. And sometimes, students get frustrated, or the PhD student loses interest, or the JD students don't show up, or or the MBA students getting frustrated. Is I really want to work on something meaningful, and I got the short straw. I got the project that is really a dead end. In CDL, that won't happen, because some of these ventures, plenty of these ventures, are the tasks you have to do. You don't need our MBA students, because you've been told to benchmark your science against the existing state of the art. You've been sent back to the lab to do something. So you can assign MBA students to ventures that need their skills at the right time. So here are the students that have finished a module on customer discovery. Well, here are the ones that need to go find some customers, and so forth. Now that takes a lot of management, but this is the idea. We are continuing to fundraise corporates, individual donors, foundations. So, with the successful fundraising is we put together the staff to manage that. And I would say, as this develops, there will be a richer, deeper, more expert staff available to make sure this works and to deal with the problem. So the venture managers who will know these companies intimately will generally be in charge of matching students to assignments. The interesting thing is some MBA students may stick with a company for a long time, for the whole program. Others may find, well, for this 8 weeks I worked on company A, and for another 8 weeks I did something different for company B. The idea is to be adaptable. Unlike most programs, most accelerator programs, this is not a curriculum for the firms. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So each venture will be going away with different tasks. Now, getting it right, that's the dream. But we pretty much know how to do it, what needs to be done.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That's going to conclude the presentation part of our program. These guys will hang around for a little bit longer if you have questions. We're going to have a reception out in the atrium, so we hope you can join us there as well. Thanks for coming.